And we are live. Hey, folks. And welcome, especially to our two guests, Caitlin Stormbreaker and Emily, to episode 30. Can you fucking believe it? Cheers, y'all.
Skull.
Oh, yeah. That's good. I'm very happy with that.
So, opening prayer?
I got it. Hail to the wild hunt. Hail to the coursers in darkness, endless pursuers of the fretless and the unclean. Hail to the belly slitter. Hail to the wild one. Thirst and Frau Hall. Hail. Now is the time of monsters, and we have need of your might and your blessings, holy ones. Watch over us, I pray. Bless our actions, our words, our magic. Bless our fires with healing and with hope. Ride well, holy ones. Everyone must keep us all. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So, with everything going on in the world today, today's theme is the world is on fire, and the drink that you've prepared for us is absolutely appropriate to that.
Thanks. So I did smoked old fashions using this kit that I finally broke out after having it for more than a year. Yeah, it's kind of neat.
Thank you, man.
I've been looking for a reason to try it and also kept forgetting to anyway. But yeah, had to do some experiments, but it turned out, and I'm actually really pleased with how these turned out.
Mm-hmm. So, I didn't have to keep turning off my.
That's all right. We don't have any comments yet.
Nope.
There we go.
Just gotta kill my stream again.
Yep. Sarenth is joining us on his phone so that he can also keep track of comments. Since we're all together tonight, it's a little harder for everyone to see the comments.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, with things being on fire the way they are in the country, and with the massive amount of frustration that we've all been feeling, it felt like a really good time to get together and to just share in community with each other.
Hey, Melkor, we are doing well. We're doing well.
As well as we can.
Yeah. Hope you're doing well as well.
Hey, Kat. Good to see you.
Hello.
Speaking of firekeepers, Brain, come on.
Let's take a second to ground.
Yeah, do that. Y'all talk.
I should have brought chicken.
Oh, that would
You should have brought chicken.
Yeah, chicken. For those of you who are on the broadcast that don't know, chicken is a stuffed chicken that our intrepid and wonderful Emily likes to bring around places like Crossing Hedgerow Sanctuary and Farm. Hello, Josie. Hey, Brian. Ooh, this is Brian Stevens from the Michigan Brews YouTube channel. Awesome.
Who has been our guest once. Yes.
Oh,
Welcome back.
I love the smoky smell.
Man,
This is an excellent whiskey. I don't know what you put in it, but
that one's entirely red brown. So,
what's this?
That one is a mix of.
That's your infinite whiskey, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the cider cask of Tullamore Dew, mixed with mostly with a little bit of my Infinity bottle of whiskey. So
Gotcha.
which is in that little cask right behind Emily, which you can you can't see it all. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Yep. And I basically the idea behind an infinity bottle is you take the last dregs, the last ounce or two of any given bottle, pour it in, it mixes over time and creates something interesting, ideally. Yeah, I've been doing that and then like it changes over time because you empty it and refill and everything. Been doing that particular bottle for probably 4 years now, 5 years.
I think you mentioned it was 5 years.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, so sacred fires. Our two most experienced.
Oh.
Also, a around grandfather fire.
Yeah. Look at that. Both virtual and in person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was actually thinking about that after you invited me a few days ago to be on, and I was like, I do know a lot of different varieties of sacred fires. Interesting. I like the variety that sacred fires really have. And when I really started thinking about it, I was like, holy crap, like in the Kyoto tradition, which is my original line of spiritual teaching, they had like one main fire, sacred fire that they would do for birthdays, weddings, funerals, transitions, deaths, celebrations, whatever, but it was always the same basic setup, but it had a lot to do with the intention and what was put into said sacred fire. But it was always the same. They would have to travel miles down the mountain, collect a bunch of sticks from the trees down there because they lived above the tree line, and then carry all of those back up to the village to then have a sacred fire. And then I learned about heathen fire traditions from Sarenth, but I haven't been initiated into the fire tending thing, which is a thing we'll probably talk about later.
Oh, yeah.
But even those are totally different flavor from what the Karo traditions are. And then I was lucky enough to sit in on a few Native American fires. And those are even more different, but if you break it down and look at like the brass tacks and everything that goes into it, it's all basically the same thing. And it has wood, it has air, it has fire, and offerings. But it's the traditions that make the difference.
Which is interesting too, because ours don't have offerings.
Right.
So for pack fires, I'm limited in what I can talk about, but like this is fine. For pack fires, offerings are not a thing. It will accept offerings for other people, but not for itself. For itself, the fire itself is the offering. If that kind of makes sense.
Makes total sense. Are there sacred fire traditions in Kemeticism? As such, in the way we're talking?
Not that I'm aware of, not that I could speak to. Doesn't mean they don't exist, but it is not in my purview.
Because I know the guys got like oil lamps and things like that, but nothing like a pit fire or something like that.
I am not aware of such, but again.
Yeah.
Could be just not one you're aware of.
Right.
Excuse me. Yeah, as far as the heathen traditions go, one of the things that I was initiated into pretty early on when I became a heathen was working with sacred fire with flint and steel. You can also use friction fires and things like that. The point of it is that the fire brings you into a unique sacred relationship with it as the eldest ancestor. And it ties into our creation story where you have, for the Nordic heathens anyway, you have fire and ice are the first two worlds, and fire comes out of the Gnanka gap first, and then you have it followed by ice. And the point of initiating into fire is to reenact that first creation, that first spark. And it doesn't, once you've done it, when you've made your fire with flint and steel and usually some kind of char cloth, what really matters is that you carry that spark to every fire, whether it's technically a sacred fire or not. And your firekeeper made an excellent point.
Yep. So
the tinder is the offering and the act of starting it.
Yep. There we go. See, this is why I asked them to pay attention tonight, because they quite literally know better than me about
that. And in heathenry, a lot of our tack around how you collect, what you put into it, it matters. And I would say that having been in a couple of native fire ceremonies, there is a decent amount of thought put into it. It's just that our ingredients tend to be different. Because you're, in a very real sense, that what my experience was being around native fires and being around heathen fires is that the similarity is that you're reenacting the creation story from the start every time you make a sacred fire. So it's a living creation story as opposed to one you're just telling and you're supposed to just glean passive information in. Every time you tell the creation story, whether it's literally telling it or telling it through the fire, it's a different story every time, but it's also the same in kind of a sacred way.
Yeah. And the way that stories are.
Right.
Sorry, go on.
I would say that sacred fire is a thing in Comedicism, but not so much as like a bonfire, since so many of the rites were in the temples and such. And in Comedic Orthodoxy, in their rite of Senate, fire is at the beginning of every rite, but it's a candle.
That makes sense. Especially when you're talking about temple complexes that had people to make shit like that.
And a lot of the food offerings, if they were to the gods, they were oftentimes consumed afterwards, after they were reverted, as opposed to other religions, maybe where they were burned.
So they don't burn them; they just straight up eat them after the gods are done with them. So for those of you who know anything about at least some Hindu puja, this is similar to the practice of prasad, at least as far as I've experienced puja. Very much the gods have had their share of the essence. Now you all get to have this blessed food.
Which is interesting.
Which is another thing. I did a lot of reading on Ganesha a while back, just because he just kind of appeared, and I was like, "Oh, buddy, okay, I guess we're doing this." A lot of his is specific colors and flowers, and they would have specific ritual burning. But his main offering wasn't food, but it was not food for him specifically. It's food for the homeless or the people who needed the food. Give service to your community, take care of each other, lift each other up, and stuff like that. And so that's why I always kind of lean more towards Ganesha than I do any of the other ones, because he's really intense sometimes, but he's also like, fucking take care of each other, otherwise I'm gonna wreck your world.
Right.
He reminds me a lot of Jehudi in a lot of ways. It's like describe aspects as well as like the fun and enjoyment of the fruits of life aspect.
Interesting. I would never have drawn that connection. Like, I see it now that you say it, but I'm like, I never would have drawn that spontaneously. But that's interesting, and like that speaks to the diversity of experience. That's really interesting.
Julie's also right behind you, Storm.
Hey, buddy.
His idol's right there. Backtracking slightly to the creation story. So the fun thing about creation myths, right, is that they aren't always necessarily about the actual creation of the world.
Right.
Like in a lot of creation myths, the world's already there, and it's about the establishment of the society or whatever.
Order or whatever.
Yeah. So in a lot of ways, there can be multiple creation myths in any tradition, and they can each mean different things. It's not written yet, and I haven't told it yet, and I don't think I'm actually the one to receive it. I think that would be our firekeeper, but I'm not making work for you. It's fine. That work was already there. And
we're all laughing because we've all been there.
Yeah, it's fine. But there's a myth that I can see the edges of for pack tradition about wolves and man meeting for the first time at the fire, because that's historically we know that's where that happened.
Right.
Or we don't know. We believe that's where that happened. That's the best guess we have.
Anthropology has its say, and mythology has its own.
Exactly. And it's fine. But yeah, there's a creation myth there for pack tradition. It's not the only one, but like it's there, and it's interesting.
It's worth pointing out too that a lot of our
I just was gonna say a shout out, hello to Spider Moose.
So the creation stories also play into the subject of our show, which is three pagans on tap. Well, at least in the Nordic stories, we have the story of how the first mead came to be. And it was from the being who was spat into existence by the peace pact of the Aesir and the Vanir at the conclusion of their war back in prehistory, back in the early days of the mythology. And Kvasir was said to be one of the wisest beings in the 9 worlds, and was the combined might of, and by might I mean Megan, the holy power, the holy might of the gathered gods. It's worth pointing out too that through his blood comes the first mead, and so we have in his creation and death and fermentation the story of the creation of sacred drink. And that sacrifice is something that I know I honor, and I'm pretty sure you honor every time you brew.
Every time I brew, and every time we do a show, he's included in my offerings before the show.
So, creation stories aren't necessarily just, how we humans got here or how the universe was ordered. Sometimes it's something that seems pretty insignificant on the surface, and then it's, oh, this has a whole new meaning behind it now that you understand the story. And that, in a very real sense, mead is the sacred bond maker, bond giver.
I think that's a really interesting point that you make, because all throughout various different mythologies and stories of creation, there are these little subtle changes where the gods and the spirits had to intercede within the mortals' lives and change the course of humanity in a way that, because we were going down a certain track, people were going off the rails, becoming violent, or becoming just lost and wasted away in all the spoils and all the pleasures and everything. So you had to have someone come twist them back the other way. And to kind of steer this conversation, we come back, we're kind of going through creation pains right now, a little bit. Like, it started to happen a little bit in the 60s, a little bit in the 70s. We dropped back down in the 90s, came back up a little bit in the 2000s, and suddenly we fucking ripped the rug out from underneath it again and landed on our faces in the 2020s. Yeah. But that's something I'm kind of clinging to, just a modicum of hope for, because it's like we're not that dumb. We're a lot stronger than we were. We're a lot smarter. We have a lot more resources available to us, and a lot more people are awake right now, and they're paying attention, and they're seeing what is happening. And I have hope that a lot of the shit that's going on right now will be either forestalled and stopped in its tracks before it goes too far, and other things will be reversed and will return back to that other track.
From your lips to the God's ears. Sorry, I already killed mine.
I can't drink any more of mine because I have to drive home, so if you want the rest of it.
Gimme.
That's delicious, by the way.
Yep.
Ooh.
That one's legitimately better. That one was made with primarily Redbreast 12 year, which is a significantly better whiskey than, the dregs of the various bottles that I threw together.
Just as a side note before we move on, Spider Moose waves enthusiastically.
Very nice. Also, Kat,
Pretty sure it's a group project.
Fine. Signing myself up for work. It's fine. I do that.
I do it all the time.
So I think one of the things I'm going to piggyback off of what you were talking about. I take a lot of comfort from the Ragnarok myth, and I didn't used to, because there's something after the end. The world tree survives. Leaf and Leafrasir live post Ragnarok. The gods live in whatever ways, shapes, and forms they take after Ragnarok. I mean, that story is such a fertile field for the imagination that even modern anime is starting to take inspiration from it and is making all kinds of interesting stories about what happens after Ragnarok.
Well, and that was always kind of my issue with the apocalyptic type movies and stories that were out there for so long, because the world would fall apart and just implode on itself, and then boom, it's done.
Right.
Like, there has to be something after it, whether we escape to the stars or we all live underground for 500 years and then emerge and see, oh, the Earth is just fine in our toxic wake. Let's try to do it better this time.
Right.
And I like to see stories that are kind of coming through that and finding a different avenue out of, like, oh, it's just doom and gloom at the end, everybody dies. Instead, no, there are a few people left and they're actually working to do a better job.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the difference between a lot of polytheist and animist traditions, is that even their end of the world stories almost always, at least to my understanding and my experience, their apocalypse stories, Ragnarok, etc., there is an after. They're cyclical. I know someone who's built an entire tradition and practice around a yearly cycle of Ragnarok. That Ragnarok is every year. And versus the dominant Christian mythology, which is the apocalypse comes and that's it. It's not cyclical. It's an ending. It's a hard stop.
Yeah, there's a terminal to it.
Yeah.
But if you've been a good Christian, you get to go to paradise.
Right, but the world itself is still destroyed, right?
Right.
There's
everything here is just gone.
Yeah, there's an after, yes, but it is an ending after, not a cyclical after. Right? There's not a cool and we begin again, and then this can happen again. It's done and that's it.
Yep.
Melkor says humans are 90% spite. We'll find a way to survive. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Very true.
We will. I mean,
but I believe they call it adaptation and not spite.
I mean, both.
Yeah.
Tomato, tomato?
Yeah.
I mean, the fact of the matter is that people survived the Holocaust. As horrible as it is, humans can survive the most absurd things.
Horrific things. I actually wanted to kind of touch on something. I saw a lot of different like therapists and shit on Instagram, I guess. Yeah, we'll just call it shit.
Thank you.
But there was a therapist that showed up and said, I want to remind everybody that I know you want to get out of this traumatic, helpless state that you have felt yourself within over the last 2 years. But what I'm telling you is that all it is going to be a Band-Aid right now, because that trauma cycle is being perpetuated and it's going to keep going. So if you do have that feeling of hopelessness and lethargy and unable to get past these horrible feelings, it's because the cycle isn't over. Just keep doing that self-care, keep taking care of yourself, keep going to therapy, keep talking to people, and keep supporting each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. And on a note to your Holocaust mention, they survived because they had people who helped them, that reached out a hand and pulled them out of danger, out of attics, out of back ends of trucks, out of...
sometimes it was a stranger they never met, and sometimes it was their community.
Yeah, sometimes it was a soldier in the opposing army that said, I can't fucking do this anymore. I cannot torture these people. Get in the back of my military truck, we're going.
I think that one of the things that really needs to be kept in mind as we talk about these historical narratives is these are living traumatic memories.
Yes.
And it is certainly an acceptable and fine thing to not want to, especially if this is something that happened to your family, to you. Dwelling there is hard. Re-encountering these things again and again is hard. So if the last couple of years have been really hard, whether you're a trans person dealing with trauma from family and then having to see the same kinds of rhetoric on TV, or whether you're a heathen, say, with Christian traumatic upbringings, and you're having to watch as the public basically eats itself, it is okay and fine and good to step away from media. It is okay, fine and good to step away from fuck all everything and detox media and otherwise for a while. We've had, 68 mass shootings in June alone. So if you need to step away from the news cycle just based on that alone, that is totally legit and understandable and a good thing to do. You can't exist in the headspace of trauma every moment. It will eat you. And it is okay to do the things, whether it's something silly like grabbing a stuffed animal and just hugging it for a while, or binging your favorite shows again and again and again. Whatever, reading a favorite book, listening to music, whatever you got to do to get through the day. At this point, just surviving is resistance in a very profound way. And for those who have the energy to do it, yes, you can take things further. But if all you can do right now is just hang on by your nails and survive, that is enough. You are enough.
Mm-hmm. And feel free to scream into the void too. I've done that a few times. We went down over the weekend to my family's house, and they just leave the news on as background noise. And every single time I don't know if we're saying it, but the A topic came up, I would get up and walk out of the room. And I was getting up probably 10 or 15 times every single day and leaving and going to another area of the house or going outside or going for a walk or whatever, because I can't see it anymore. Like, I cannot feel like people have failed me. I can't feel that anymore. I can't feel that rage, that anger, that fucking sadness, core deep anymore. I can't do it. Because I'm going to fucking punch somebody. Excuse my F-bombs.
Nah, we're explicit.
We're literally drinking on air. It's fine.
Okay. But if you need to get up and walk away, give yourself the permission to do so. And you don't have to answer people when they ask you where you're going either.
No.
You can just say, I need to go do something.
Give yourself the same grace you would hope somebody else would give you. That you would give to somebody else. If you can't give yourself that grace in the moment, treat yourself to somebody else and give that person the grace you should be receiving.
Mm-hmm.
Chicken would like to say that hugging stuffed animals is not a silly act.
I agree with Chicken.
Josie says the void practices active listening, and I will fully agree with that.
Okay,
Yep.
In Comedicism, there's the concept of Zeptepi, which is like each year, each day, each second is a new beginning and a chance for a brand new start. So, I tend to celebrate New Year's like at least three times during the year.
That's awesome.
Because there is the Gregorian New Year on January 1st. There's the Kemetic New Year, which happens at the beginning of August-ish. And then Samhain. Sometimes I mark it the New Year's as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like that idea of you can always restart. Every second is a new chance to change direction. Do you know anything about Greek sacred fires? Sacred fires in the Greek tradition?
Very little. The Greeks were really fond of pinching shit from Comedics. So
just entirely.
The only thing is that in Kemet, the dry season was so dry.
Right. So
it was the desert.
their sacred fires would be around things like the sacrificial fire,
Mhm.
where if you were offering, say, to the Olympians, you would burn the offering with the fats, bones, and non-edible organ meats. You would bury to chthonic gods. The other things that were often used as sacred fires were torches in processions, such as Dionysian festivals, which the whole fucking city would be lit up like a Christmas tree for a lot of these festivals because they had so many initiates. The other thing were like braziers and things like that, oil lamps, and depending on what your personal house practice was or your oikos practice, oikos being the city that you were living in, or polis as it would become later known as in Roman times. Depending on what your particular practice was for that city, you might have a oil burning lamp that you would keep burning through the night, or you might have it burning during certain festival seasons, things like that. So a lot of similarity in terms of the Egyptian and Kemetic and Greek polytheist traditions, because I mean they flagrantly they would flagrantly take stuff out of context from the Kemet. Not just in the times of the Ptolemaics, but also
Previously, yeah.
Oh yeah.
The trade between them alone was enough for that.
Mm-hmm. So the thing about a lot of the fire traditions and the burning traditions is that even though in the particulars the differences are very noted, we don't have oil burning lamps in heathenry, for instance, but that's because we had a fucking abundance of wood. Also, this is why we don't have many idols that have survived to this point, because most of the idols were made of wood.
Yeah.
And if it's wood, it floats. And if it floats, so I've got my one Monty Python reference out for the evening. I'm good now.
All right. So we're calling it now.
So my sister got bit by a moose.
Not spider moose.
Not spider moose.
Spider moose is better behaved.
Spider moose, for those watching at home, is the counterpart that Cat Blackwell has to chicken.
Both are stuffed animals.
They're both stuffed animals. It's fine. They have conversations.
And they go on better adventures than I do.
They do, actually.
I'm a little jealous.
But in terms of like fire traditions and the endings and the beginnings, I think that one of the things that's most remarkable is that out of the burning fire, the tree lives. Out of the burning fire, the offerings are sent up. And all of these are sacred reenactings of different mythological cycles, right? And this is true whether we're talking about Hellenics with the first sacrifice to Zeus, or heathens and the reenacting of the creation story, the ordering of the cosmos with the sacred fire for various native traditions is built into the structure of how that fire is made. And this also takes place for different fires, like if you're going into a sweat lodge in Inipi. That is a very different fire from a sacred fire at a powwow.
And it's also very different fire from a communal fire in the middle of the tribe center.
Yep. And I will definitely say, having done our fair share of sacred fires, a pagan sacred fire at a festival is very, very different from one we put on for ourselves.
And very unique year to year, even though we carry the coals from year to year.
It's almost like these are living beings that change.
Weird.
Right?
Weird.
It's like, well, last year it really, really liked alcohol, and this year it wants no food, no liquor, no nothing. Just all natural offerings.
I mean, this is fair. Kim says, heathens are kind of pyros. This is legit and true.
I mean, if you live in a cold, frozen tundra like that, you're going to be a little addicted to fire.
I mean,
I'm not going to lie.
That's like saying you're addicted to water if you're in a desert, though. You kind of need it.
Addicted is a strong word, all right? Could you live without it? Maybe. Should you? Probably not.
Yeah, but could you imagine having that many pelts on you and you're just this big sweaty ball? Now that I put that in your heads, you're all welcome.
Anyway, moving on. What were we talking about? Anyone but
Fire.
him?
Have you used fire in your personal practice?
Ooh.
I have a unique, because I've been doing a lot of work to remove the barriers, remove the lines between my spiritual practice and my life. And so, yeah, I know it's hard. It's not fun.
No, and I'm getting beat with it right now.
No, it sucks. Good luck. It's like 2 years on you, so if you have questions, I'll help. Best I can. But one of the ways I will utilize fire is I have a gas stove at home. And so I have literal flames underneath whatever I'm cooking. And so even though it is gas and though it is not a pure fire, it's still fire to me, and it's still cooking my food. It's still providing me something to consume and provide for my family. And so I will say prayers to that fire. Or like my Bic, I have my all sacred Bic that I use to light my cigarettes.
I love sacred Bics.
I've had this freaking Bic lighter for more than 3 years now.
Yeah.
It shows no signs of giving up.
Yeah, they're unstoppable.
I think there's something that you said that I want to kind of piggyback off of.
I have one more before I leave it. The internal fire specifically.
Ooh.
So if I'm lagging in the day, I have certain like Tai Chi poses and certain yoga poses that I will do to invigorate that fire. But there is that internal fucking engine that is in there that I have to build up and add energy to in order for me to keep my ass going. So that's another fire that I use in my everyday practice.
I was gonna say, isn't there internal fire in the yogic tradition?
So the thing I was going to piggyback off of
to, like,
was the notion of a clean fire versus an unclean fire. I think that, and I don't mean to call you out specifically with this, but the notion of a clean versus unclean fire, like if you're starting this sucker with like gasoline and it's disrespectful, that's one thing. I think you're doing a gas fire in the most respectful way possible. You're doing the prayers, you're doing the setup, and you're thanking the fire for its service. Because this is the situation we've got, right? Like, I have an electric stove at home. I'm so much more used to a gas stove.
You probably didn't see it, but I did air quotes around the
I did not see
part.
it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was monitoring comments.
I come from a very practical tradition.
Absolutely.
If we have to use a Bic to light the fires, then we use the Bic because it's the easiest way to go about it. And I make my own fire starters too, to try to be as like clean of a fire as I can, and I try to keep paper and stuff away from it. But sometimes you don't have an option.
Right.
If you need a fire, stuff some fucking paper down there, throw some drawers in there, and light that bitch on fire.
You remember me when I first got into the fire tradition.
I do.
There
were times when I wanted to be like
hugely anal about
stop.
What went into the fire and how. Josie says cough, Lokian's cough. So I used to be hugely particular on how the fire was started, what was put in it, how it was made. I used to be that heathen.
I wonder where you got it.
No idea. That's weird.
I will never ever tell Sarenth this out loud, so don't listen. But there were a few that I started up when he wasn't looking.
Fabulous. Thank you. That's amazing.
That's fucking weird.
That's the Loki in me that made me do that. Just like, I was trying so hard.
He's not paying attention.
Yep.
Got it.
Look, it's going. You did it.
Oh, good job. Good job, buddy. You win.
Love you.
Thank you. I love you too.
That flint and steel and cinder sure got.
Great job, buddy.
And it's a windy, rainy fucking Michigan Pagan Fest. You sure got that with flint and steel.
Good job.
Oh.
You're dead ass.
Well, now you fucked yourself, because now every time I do a sacred fire from here on out, I'm looking.
Yeah, but you're not with the team anymore.
No, I'm not. I'm certainly not nowhere near as bad as I used to be.
Traditions are important, but sometimes you just gotta use the blowtorch and it's just as sacred.
I mean,
there are prayers you can say to your blowtorch and make the fucking thing sacred if you have to.
I mean, you're starting a torch. You got to use some kind of spark. You have flint and steel.
There's literally flint and steel in the blowtorch. Like that's how they're started.
Or
that's a striker.
Yeah, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
No,
Oh, I'm used to strikers.
Like
just because
I see fires as like gateways and being connected to fires past and present, an easy way to connect to the ancestors. But I also have like a USB lighter that just sends a little arc. And so I think it's interesting to think of the idea of like electricity and if it can be used as a gateway to and connecting, just like an aside that came across. But I do like, I call it fire jumping as a way of journey work, going into the fire to like transfer to other fires.
I actually had a fire teach me that. It was one of our Michigan pagan.
Oh yeah.
And I was just sitting out there zoning out into the fire, and then all of a sudden I was at a fire from 2 years prior, and then all of a sudden I was in the woods in the fire with another family, and I was like, "What is happening?" And then I was a little further back, and then a little further back, and I was like, "What is going on?"
I mean, when you talk about the first fire as being the first ancestor for heathen, it makes total sense. My heathen brain's like, no, I mean, why wouldn't the eldest ancestor be connected to all of them? I mean, some of those fires are lit in desperation, and some of those fires are like, I just want to see something blow up.
I mean, and it's not in all Native American tribes, but several tribes carry this tradition of when they put a fire out, they will gather some of the coals and carry it hundreds of miles to light the next fire, because every fire is connected and should be connected, because they all carry those prayers, all those blessings that they had already done.
In my sacred work pack, I have multiple fire charcoal. Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too, is carrying the ash is an invocation to that fire, to the specific fire spirit, but also to, because it's not just the eldest ancestor, it's
each fire is its own spirit, on top of being connected to and a representation of the oldest fire. It's both at once. Two things can be true at once.
Yeah, when I do my fire prayers, I hail the eldest ancestor and whatever the Elder Vetar, the fire spirit literally translates to, that's present. That's a really
Party in Muspelheim.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that's the thing that I don't understand about modern heathenry, is that people want to shit on Cert as like he is the first named being that comes out of the Gununga Gap.
He's fucking cool.
Yep. I'm not saying he's hot. I'm not saying it. Nope.
Hey, I thought he was cool.
I will say he's hot. Sir, eldest ancestor is built.
Big fire daddy.
Can't take y'all anywhere, Jesus Christ. I'm not any better. Don't let.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Don't throw us under that bus.
Right. But I think it's interesting though that people have such an animosity-filled relationship with fire in the modern day, when it's literally the thing that connects the internet together, because we basically banged a couple of rocks together into the think.
Yep.
And we have fire coursing through the thinking rock. Like when you break it down to like the base elements, like.
I mean, it's what's kind of heating your house right now too. If you're on gas,
right?
You have a flame in your furnace that heats up hot air and then blows hot air into your house.
I mean, you take that far down enough, you're burning dead things.
Basically.
Yeah. You're like fossil fuels you're literally burning the ancestors for warmth and power.
Sorry, guys.
Right?
I think they like to be, ancestors tend to like to be abused. To be frank.
Are we disrespectful to the ancestors that are in gas and coal and everything else?
Sure.
Yes. Can we honor them and try to work to reverse that and right that relationship at least a little bit in our own lives? Yeah.
I have to believe we could do that as a society, because otherwise we're really fucked. There's yes. I'm sorry.
There's a lot of frayed edges going on
right
now.
Fully agree.
One thing at a time.
Kim says, "Who's your daddy?" And 2 little fire emojis. But I agree. I have to think that we can, if not repair the relationship, we can, like Yggdrasil after Ragnarok, we can give it new life. Like, we may not be able to fix this because Ragnarok's already here. Climate change is baked into the cake. We can't fix that as individual communities. What we can do is say, okay, here's what our response is. Here's how we're going to make it through. Here's what our mutual aid is going to look like. So instead of assigning unnecessary hate and blame to ourselves and others for people who are just trying to live,
Yeah.
we're doing the best we can.
And to be completely clear, sorry, I keep playing footsie on accident. In no fashion am I trying to say that it is the fault of the layperson on the ground.
Right.
That is no. Our society was set up this way. Our society was set up by those with power to be consumers. You're not evil because you ordered from Amazon. Should you try to boycott Amazon as much as possible? Yeah. Is your individual boycott going to make a difference? No. And you're not a bad person for ordering from Amazon. Our society is set up such that Amazon can and will win every time. We need to do grassroots efforts as much as possible through community to fight the bigger powers, because you can't fight that fight alone and win.
Right.
You can only do it through community.
It's also worth pointing out that most of the backbone of the internet, about a third of it, is run by Amazon internet systems.
I know that.
I'm sorry, AES, I think it is, Amazon Engineering Systems. So about a third of the back corridor of the internet is completely supported by Amazon. So you'll see, if you click on a link and it says routing through AES, that's Amazon. So most of your major websites, Facebook, Twitter, Google, a lot of them have Amazon as their backbone. So even on the back of this great, wonderful tool driven by Fire, we still have to handle the fact that a lot of the backbone of the very internet with which we're doing this broadcast on is supported by a company that we don't agree with.
Yeah.
Caitlin says, "Oh my God, they actually caught y'all live."
Hey, welcome in. We're talking about the apocalypse this time.
You have a great name, by the way.
I think too, like one of the things I love about this community that we're all part of, physically as well as through the internet of around Grandfather Fire and through Pagans on Tap's discords, is there's hope. It's not just we're going to whip out the salice and beat ourselves over the back and woe is us. We're all working on workable solutions, both in our individual lives and in our communities, right?
And as much as we're capable of, too. You know, we're not asking people to push themselves to their absolute boundaries and then go even further. It's like, do what you can when you can. You know, you can pick up the slack when you get there, kind of thing. Like, but we got to keep moving forward.
I think that patience is something that I find, at least in online activist spaces, is missing a lot of times, because we've got to have this handled. We got to have this handled. Like, y'all, the Montgomery bus boycotts took 10 plus years to put together. The abortion rights activists took 10 plus years to put together. The ADA took 10 to 20 years of planning before the major protests that presaged the passage of the ADA. Like, and a lot of community development takes time.
And you've got to plan for the long haul. The Montgomery bus boycotts went on for more than a year.
That's a lot when you're talking about this is my only form of transportation to and from work.
And they made it work as a community. They arranged car rides. They arranged for people's kids to get watched. They paid for shit. They did the work to make sure people were okay not riding the bus when they had needed to ride the bus for years.
Yep.
They made it work. It took a long time. It took a lot of effort. A lot of people got hurt. They made it work. They made the change.
It's also worth pointing out that different sectors did different things at different times. You had the nonviolent, no weapons, no nothing protesters who were front and center on the TV cameras, and they were supported by people with guns.
Yep. Black Panthers absolutely had guns and are absolutely the reason that we have the Voting Rights Act today.
Voting Rights Act, school lunches, so many social programs are because, maybe we should provide that so we don't get showed up by the black people, is basically what the government eventually came around to. Yep. And so you don't have to put out the big fire of Ragnarok. You can take care of the little fires that are in your neighborhood.
Like, so, example from my own life. I've started working with the IWW, International Workers of the World, or Industrial Workers of the World, sorry, to try to unionize, or at least start efforts towards unionization of my workplace.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being a little quiet about specifics because I don't want to get fired. But that's beside the point. I do not expect that my workplace will unionize. I don't think it'll work. It doesn't matter. I still have to try, for one, and two, it's not wasted effort. Every bit of momentum I build here, I can take to the next place. And so can everyone that I talk to. It doesn't matter whether or not I'll succeed here. I'm still going to try, and I'm still going to carry that momentum forward to the next job, and hopefully start the seeds in everyone else's minds that I talk to, so that maybe they'll start too.
Yeah.
I mean, Henry Ford didn't want unions when he started Ford. In fact, I don't think he didn't allow unions until 10 or 15 years into running his company.
Until they forced him.
Until they forced his hand, and finally he said, well, if this is the only way I get workers, then fine, I guess so. And the UAW now stretches across all automotive companies that are American-based, and they do some pretty great things. But that doesn't mean that the entity of the UAW itself is completely invaluable, because there are corruption in the UAW as well. But does it still do very good things? It does.
I think that's something that we who care about these issues. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? But people who care about issues of community safety, community solidarity, we are not going to ally with perfect people. The UAW is a classic example, because they just had this huge corruption sting, 2 or 3 years ago. I remember reading about it on NPR, and you are not going to ally with perfect people. It doesn't matter how left they are. It doesn't matter how anarchist or who they've read. I don't give a flying fuck if they've read all of Bukachin. I don't give a flying fuck if they've read all of Marx or Engel or any of the rest of them. Nobody's going to be the perfect ally for the fight. You work with the allies you got on the ground. No union member is going to be perfect. There are union members that I can't stand in my union, and I'm a union guy. And I'm still going to march arm in arm with them in the capacity that I can, because I, technically speaking, cannot march because of our union agreement. Point being is that even the unions have to make some concessions sometimes that you don't like or agree with. And that it's better to have an imperfect ally than to expect perfection, because you will be disciplined every fucking time.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing about community is there is calling out, which is important, and there is calling in. They're different things, and they're both important.
Both are practice.
And both are practice. How many times have I called you?
I don't know. We've called each other in a lot of times.
And
likewise, both of you, you've called me in.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you said something you may wish to rethink.
And not just called in. I've called both of you out on Discord.
Yep.
I said, hey, that was fucked.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I said it with as much respect and love as I could, but
yeah,
it was like, hey, that was fucked. I trust y'all to make it right, but that was fucked.
Yep.
We're sharing a drink, like.
That's another thing that you also have to remember as a person who's being called out is, yes, you are being called out. Yes, your actions were a little left of center, but it's what you do afterwards that repairs what you did. You know, right. You can't just sit there and be like, oh, I fucked up. I'm such a horrible person. You can go, oh, I fucked up. What do we do to make it better? And then you make it better.
Yep. So Kat says, matchbooks with Sacred Fire stamped on them for the small jobs the flamethrower is too much for. I mean, how many situations have we been in where it's like, this is the best I can do? Yep. I've got a matchbook. I don't have flint and steel. I've got a Bic. I don't have a match. I've got an electric starter. I mean,
you got what you got.
Yeah. I've got encouraging words to say, keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Keep doing it. Or here's some water for you. It looks like that fire's getting a little hot.
Yeah.
Keep the fire burning. The water's for you.
No, I remember there's been more than a couple of Sacred Fires you're like, Hey, Sarenth, you're looking pretty soft. We should go warm up. Like that one where we had the torrential downpour and I was dancing in the middle of it.
You and do both.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the main heavy downpour, all three of us were out there, and we were laughing because all the other people,
everybody scattered.
They scattered and ran away, and we're just like,
build the fire up. Let's go.
More wood, more wood.
It was this like shield of steam around the sacred fire. It was so fucking cool.
Water wasn't even getting anywhere.
No.
Close to those flames.
What was great was the security guys were like, you could see the fire from the front of the building. Because it was literally a pillar about as tall as a man.
Yeah.
And about as wide.
It was pretty great.
And there was lightning overhead. And all three of us were looking at each other like, are we gonna leave the sacred fire alone? No, fuck it, put on more fire. Put on more wood. I mean, that's the joy of community sometimes. Like, sometimes it's, yeah, this is probably a stupid move, but we're going to do it together and just clasp hands and make it happen.
Yeah.
There's a meme that floats around occasionally that there's two I'm going to mention that I particularly like. There's the beginner spiritual person cleansing their house, walking around with a stick of incense and a crystal going, if you are not of love and light, please leave this space. Thank you for your time, but you are not welcome here anymore.
Experienced
practitioner walking around, get out, bitch! Get out!
Thank God.
With food. Wow, wow.
I think it was just...
Mine is usually become an ally or get the fuck out.
I like that.
Two choices.
I like that. So, really quick aside, there was I think it was a medieval spell for bringing on the rain. You would fill a pot of water, walk outside and yell at the sky, and as you're dumping the bucket out, see, it's not so hard.
Yep. I love it.
Fabulous.
I feel like that sounds like a lot of comedic there.
Comedics are also the ones who would straight up threaten their god.
Definitely.
I will stop if you don't do the fucking thing.
Yeah, you will not get the offering.
Yeah. It's fine. The other meme that I really like, and I don't see it as often, but it is one of my favorites. It's one of those beginner pack, intermediate pack, advanced packs, and the beginner pack is like crystals and incense and lighters and this and that and the other thing, and then you've got the intermediate pack, which is like
half of that, a little
either half of that or like way more, where it's like you've got like the beginner pack, which is kind of basic, and then the intermediate pack, which is like super fancy, and then the advanced spiritual pack is guy with a cup of coffee and a cigarette. It's like, that's it.
I have met native elders like that.
Yeah. Is it coffee, cigarette? Good. Let's go.
I went to a powwow once, and I asked the firekeeper if I could do anything for him. He's like, "Yeah, give me a cup of coffee." Well, like, you sure that's all I can do? He's like, "This early in the morning, that's all I need." Wait, I'll need more as the day goes on. And then when lunch came,
ask me again in a few hours.
So when lunch came around, I'm like, "Can I get you?" He's like, "Yeah, you can give me lunch."
Sure.
Oh, and coffee.
More coffee.
Need a coffee.
More coffee. Especially at some native fires, I know that the tradition is that the firekeepers are up the entire time.
They are. Oh my God.
And with some of them, they have to fast before they do it too. So it is literally just coffee or just water.
It's spirit fire in hard mode.
Yeah. I've done it before.
It's rough.
It's rough.
It's
but
rough.
The shit that can happen.
Oh, I believe you. I believe you. I have been at several overnight vigils at Sacred Fires, and that is, man, you don't have a choice but to trance by the end. Between the sleep stuff and just everything else, everything is trance all the time.
So I think one of the things that really comes to mind is we're coming to 8 o'clock is come together in community, come around the Sacred Fires. It's okay to roast marshmallows over the Sacred Fires.
Just ask first.
Yeah, just ask first.
And sometimes the fire might want a s'more.
I think our last Sacred Fire, actually, we put a bunch of s'mores in them.
Some of the marshmallows.
So
you were not offering them, so they took what they wanted.
No, actually, I intentionally offered some.
And then I think it took some more.
It
was like not quite.
These are tasty.
It's a little more. You're good.
So I mean, like, come together in community, and that can be as simple, silly as sitting around a sacred fire with some marshmallow sticks and the kids, and just making s'mores for the evening. It can be as impactful as coming together and sharing a meal. It can be. There's so many ways that you can come together and bring community into a sacred space, into a sacred relationship. That you, that's heavy, I think.
It's new beginnings. Like each second is like a new start,
So
new
like,
opportunity to.
in a very real sense, that to me is like the sacred fire starting its own again and again and again. I think that's really what all of us can bring to each other in community is, whether we screwed up or whether we've done everything right up to this point or not, is kind of beside the point. We can have that zeptepi.
So go forth and burn shit.
Burn shit in hope, burn shit in rage, burn shit in love. We need it.
Yep. And it doesn't matter whether it is the smallest ember, the largest bonfire, or your own little small sacred candle.
Yeah. It could even be one of those little electric candles too.
Yeah.
Fire safe candles.
Yep.
All of us live in places where having an open flame is a thing we can do.
Yeah.
So light the fires and spread it to your friends, your family, your loved ones. I think that's going to call us for the evening.
Yeah. For anyone who is able to join us for the after party, we will actually be on our porch. At least a couple of us are planning to smoke a pipe for it, so it should be a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Not that the after party isn't usually a good time, but
Unfortunately, I will probably not be joining for long because I'm old and tired.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our guests for joining us. Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you for the wonderful drink too.
I'm really glad you
It was really good.
I hope to enjoy another one another day when I can stay longer.
Absolutely, for sure. So really appreciate all of you showing up, the folks who showed up for the stream, and for you who are going to be watching this afterwards. Thank you all very much. Hope you can join us on Discord.
Go out and do good things. Pack wellness and keep us all.
Let's go out. Thanks, Josie.